So we're going to do this 8-bar blues thing today, but I'm going to see about tying in some scales so that we can do some nice relaxing business on it as well. The way that we could look at this blues is, if we looked at it from the perspective of just playing major chords, we could have an E chord here. Then what would happen is that would last for 1 bar or 1 measure. So that would be for a count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then what we'd do is we'd strum it again. 2, 2, 3, 4. And then we go to the A7, to the 4 chord. So if we were imagining that this was the key of E, so we've got the key of E, then the chords we get are E, F sharp minor, G sharp minor, A, B, C sharp minor, and then we get D sharp diminished. If I just look at these here, we look at the key and we're going to pull out the 3 chords that are the major chords in the key. So we take those there, E, A and B, and we're basically taking them from being major chords and we're turning them into fancy chords, jazzing them up. Now, ordinarily, if we add a 7th on this, that would actually be an E major 7, but what we're doing is we're just changing it to an E7. The same is going to happen with the A. That's going to be an A7, and then this 5 chord, which is the real 7th, that's going to be turned into that 7th as well, which explains these chord shapes here. So essentially, we have 3 chords. Those 3 chords we're going to have are the E, the A, and the B7. I'm going to explain these. I'm going to go through them as well. So I want to look at the chords first, because what you hopefully want to be able to do is be able to see where the scales sit on top of the chords as well, and then you can mix them. So really, we want to be able to understand how to get to these 7ths and things like that. So we've got the good old E major chord here, and we've got it as a 5R3. I want you to be able to see this here, because we're looking for the chord that makes this bluesy, and the notes that makes this bluesy, and the note that makes this bluesy happens to be the flat 7 or minor 7. If we look at this, if we imagine this is his root note here on the E string, we go up an octave, then this is the octave. If we take octopus 8, go down major 7, and then I go to an open note there, that gives me my flat 7. So to get this E major there and to add that colour of that flat 7, then all I need to do is take a finger off. How easy is that? We go from a 3-finger chord to a 2-finger chord. Take that 3rd finger off there. This isn't the only chord we can do this with. And Eyup, if you're sick of pausing my YouTube lessons and scribbling down chords and diagrams, well, I've got you. PDF Club gives you a library of over 350 exclusive downloadable and printable guitar handouts and PDFs with chord charts, diagrams and worksheets all ready to rock. Just grab what you need and get back to playing. It's the perfect partner for my YouTube video lessons. Check it out now at rickysguitar.com/get PDF Club. Now back to the lesson. There's 3 shapes involved in this. 3 chord shapes from the cage system. We'll look at, got an E shape, we've got an A shape, and we've got a C shape, which is coming up as well. So here's the A chord. And this just shows you just knowing a little bit about your intervals. This is the 5th, this is the root, this is the 3rd here from that A shape there. Bless them all. Yeah. Yeah, we've got that little pattern there. If I go 5th, root, 3rd, well, that's my root. This open string here under the capo, that is the root as well. We're hearing A here. So that's an A and that's an A. Now what I do is, because that is an octave higher, oct is 8, 1 less than 8 is 7. That's the major 7. And then if I go to an open string there, that reveals the flat 7. So essentially, when I want to play my A7, I take the A major chord that I play like this. If you play it like this, it's fine, but you're going to have to readjust, and I think it's just easy. Just cut out the middleman and just play it like this. Yeah, so I can actually just, there's a major 7. We can do some voice leading there, which is nice. But it isn't the blues. So you can see that essentially I'm only holding down the 5th and the 3rd there of that chord, and all the other notes are coming from open strings. So 2 fingers again. So look, 2 fingers here on the E7, and then on the A7, 2 fingers. Now, how we want to switch to this is a really cool way of doing this, guys. So you can get a really quick switch, chord switch on this. If I pivot on this index finger, look at this. So I've got my E7 there. What I can do is I can pivot on that finger there until I get those 2 fingers there, and then take my first finger off. Yeah, and I can do it the same going back. This is that whole principle that I have about what I call scout fingers, anchor fingers. So we've got that A7 there, okay? So that's going to be my A7. But essentially, like I was saying to you, that this is a chord where we take a finger off, which is nice and easy. We like that, okay? Now, I'm just running through these 3 chords for you. We're going to play this as a B7. And it's actually kind of handy that the capo is there, because what I want to show you is if you take everything off and leave those 2 fingers on there, and I switch those fingers around there, what shape does that look like, guys? What shape does that look like? You've got to get good at recognizing the shape, knowing what a D shape looks like, knowing what a C shape and A shape, because the guitar's all about patterns and shapes. So once we know the shape, then what we can do is we can pin the intervals of the chords to it, and then we can use those then as starting points for scales. It's a C shape, so it's a tricky one, because when you see a chord, when it goes like this, and I'll show you what I mean by this, there, and then I put this one on here. Well, the reason this works, I'm going to play it up here, it's a little bit easier. This is the C shape. Now, if I put the pinky on here, there's the C shape, and I think of that as a C7 shape because I've got the pinky on there. And what's good about this is the E string, you don't play it, and the other thin E string, you don't play it. So you can strike through and hit the 4 inside strings, the A, the D, the G, and the B strings there. So you can just play those 3 there. Now, if I take that down, look at that. I'm going to move down there. The shape has still retained. I've got a root, I've got a 3rd, and I've got my 7th in here, guys. That's the flat 7. If you imagined, there's the A shape. This is a B note. So here is a B chord. Now, if I put the A7 shape on I showed you not so long since, I could play that there as a bar chord. But what if I don't want to play it as a bar chord? I want this C shape, because this shows you really where the intersect happens, because the C shape joins into the A shape. Can you see that? Look, doesn't matter where I go on the neck. If I play this here, yeah, same note, root note, now as an A shape, C shape, A shape, C shape, A shape. And it's just 2 different ways of voicing the chord that make it a bit more interesting. We can take that shape there. Now, what I like to do is get this F sharp in here, because that is the 5th of the chord. Now, if you're clever, because you know it's the 5th, you can go root, 5th there. That's a nice little doohickey to do, but if you could do that there, look, you could do it here. I'm doing an alternating bass note there. So on this, it's going. So switching between bass, rest of the chord, bass, rest of the chord. So I'm alternating between the E and the A string there. But going back to this one here, I'm just putting the 5th over here. Because it makes sense, doesn't it? Because this is an E string and this is an E string, that they would be the same note. So, and that's the way you play the B7. What we're going to do is essentially we're looking at taking fingers away. If you don't want to play the full chord and you only want to play those inside 4 strings, A, D, G, B, leave the E strings out of it, then you can have a 3-finger version there. So look, 2 fingers for this E7, 2 fingers for the A7, and then we get the B7 here like this. Now, when we go from the A7, how I showed you, if you look, if I scout with that finger there, that index finger on the 1st fret of the D string, then I can get the rest of my shape on it. And this is what I call a 2-finger group here. It just moves up a string like that. It's very easy. Yeah. It's nice if I do this as well. Go going from that minor third to the major third there. Kind of bluesy tinge there. So, E7, A7, B7. Now, that isn't the only way that we can play this. We've got this chord here, that E chord, remember? So what we did is we took fingers off to get the E7. But what we can also do is, if we think about it from a caged octave perspective, when we revealed that open note on the D string behind the capo on what would be the open string there, if I go up an octave, yeah, then that gives me the same note. So that's a flat 7 on that open note there. Then here on the 3rd fret is going to be a flat 7 as well. So that means what I can do is I play my E chord, and then I can put my pinky on here. Yeah, so look, I can put that in there. It's lovely as that. Now, another thing you can do with this is, if I pull back here, I get the 6th under there. So I get a 6th. There's just this little riff. It's worth the price of admission. So you can hear that blues thing. Now, you might have come across that sort of 2-string shuffle idea like this. But you might think that that's not chordy enough, and that's a bit riffy. And what that's doing is it's going from a power chord, yeah, to a root and a 6th, to a root and a flat 7. But what we can do is we can do the same thing here. Yeah? And this can become a lot of fun, hammering onto that 6th from the 5th. So that's an additive way of putting the notes on, but that 6th there. Now what you can do is you can do a blend of the two, and if we keep that finger on, say we wanted another 7th, what we can do is we take that 3rd finger off, and then we've got one behind on the capo on the D string, so you can hear it there on the D string and the B string there. There's a bit more rub in that chord, whereas if I put the full E shape on again and put the pinky on, it's just a bit smoother. That was a bit more moonshine, this one's a bit more Jack Daniels, okay? Right, let's look at the A as well. I play the A like this. Now I don't always play the A like this, because if I'm adding the 7th on here, then what I like to do is I cheat. And I put my 1st finger across there. Now, I understand that this might be tricky for some of you, because this is essentially a 4-string bar. I'm playing the A string open, I'm muting the thick E string. So I'm holding down the 2nd fret, 2nd fret, 2nd fret on the D, G and B string. And I'm not worried about this note. That note could be my 6th if I want it. But what I'm doing is I'm holding those down there and I'm barring. And I'm using the thumb to help me to get some purchase on that. Now, I've seen a lot of people struggle, try to get the different fingers on here. I find that the way that the tendons move here stops this from splitting easier. So what I tend to do is I use finger 1 there, I use my index, and I use my ring finger. I use finger 3 for that. So if you look at that, this note here is my flat 7, because if you think about it, there's my A, this is the 5th, this open E string here. Yeah, so if that's the 5th, this is the major 6, this is the flat 7 here. So you can hear that sounds a bit different. It's different from that. So we can get that there to give us that bluesy quality. Now what you might have noticed I did there is play the root note here, and then I take that 3rd finger off, and then I utilise that note at the 2nd fret as well. So we've got, and this note gives me that 6th, which is the same, you can hear this. what I'm doing is, to get the A shape, I'm raising the pad of that finger off the thin E string to let it ring. So just to quickly recap, we've got E7 where we take fingers off, gives us 2-finger chord here. Okay, we've got an E7 that we can put fingers on, which means we put the pinky on the 3rd fret of the B string. There, gives us a higher voice one. It's really obvious. That sticks out like a sore thumb, does that sound there, okay? So we've got that going on for the E chord. When it comes to the A chord, there's our major shape. Normal cowboy chord, take that 1st finger off. You know, and this is really beautiful because this facilitates beautiful things like this, these 6. Very pretty, yeah, just another evolution of taking this blues thing into a different territory. You can double the flat 7 on this as well, like that if you want. Now what's cool is that note comes from that scale, which I'm going to get into scales in a little bit, but let's get this done first, yeah? There, okay. So we've got that there. Now when it comes to doing the B, because this is a C shape, I want to move into that A shape, yeah? There. But I don't want to play it like this. I'm going to utilise this idea. If I take the A7 shape there, if I move it up a whole step, it becomes a B. So look, the same shape up a whole step. Yeah, I can do that there. Now what I can do is I can do this. Just go do a little cheeky grab of that root note there. Yeah, so we've got that there. There's the A7. And then there's the B7. There's the A7. So you could do that. That's a turnaround at the end there. And it's worth noting that we can do something else with the turnaround as well. There is a turnaround in E in the book because it goes with this. We've kind of got all the chords that we're going to need now. So those are the shapes. And I can drop on any of those that I fancy, really. That's the way I'm looking at it. And I will say this. I know we've got a couple of positions for the A and for the B. Why not for the E? Well, let's do one for the E. It's going to be a D7 shape. Now, if I take that D7 shape here and I move it up a whole step, chords move like notes. There's the D7. Move it up a whole step. That's an E7. So I can borrow the root note here from this E string and then just play the G, B and E string. So if I play those, and this is the thing with the turnaround. If I take that E7, E7, E flat 7, D7, back onto an E, yeah? So I can tap into that as well. So I actually do have another shape that I can use. There, right? It's nice and easy. So let's put it together. I will play through the 8-bar blues. I'm going to play it really, really straight and really, really boring so that you can focus on the chord changes. So the first chord we're going to have is E. And it's just going to be a straightforward E because what we're doing is we're establishing the key here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Bar 2 or measure 2, that's going to be E7. And now what I can do is I can shift to either of those A7s. I'm going to keep it simple. I'm going to do those 2-finger shapes there. There is the A7. That's for 2 bars or 2 measures. So now we're already halfway through the 8-bar blues there. So look, I'll play that for you again. So 1, 2, 3, 4. E7, 2, 3, 4. Pivot. 1, 2, 3, 4. There on the A. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're halfway through. Now, let's get into the next 4 bars. 1, 2, 3, 4. We do a switch to the B7, and I love how this feels in my hand, actually, because it really demonstrates how you want to be thinking about chord changes. This is a static finger, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the first finger up towards the ceiling and the third finger down towards the floor using the same fingers. So look, first finger goes up, third finger goes down, then I put my pinky on, and I get my B7 then. This is for bar 6 and bar 7. We've got E, 2, 3, 4. We do that pivoting thing, finger up, finger down, pinky on. That's 2, 3, 4. Now, here's the tricky bit. You can see here in the turnaround, we get 2 strums on the E7, 2 strums on the A7, 2 strums on the E7, 2 strums on the B7. And this last 2 bars are set aside for the turnaround. Now, with the turnaround, and let me put my mug on for emphasis, because the chords change quicker, essentially that's going to be the slowest changes that you're going to experience in this. So if you base the whole of the 8-bar blues around the constraints of the speed that you can play the turnaround, then everything will be more in time. And you've got to remember, it's okay to play the blues slow, because the slower you play it, the sadder it is. Yeah, the dog's gone, the wife's gone, the car's gone, the repo man's had that, the house has gone. You're basically sat in a ditch. You might have shoes, I don't know. So let's just look at that. I'm going to zoom in on the changes there. So I've got E7. I'm going to pivot on that first finger there to get the A7 there, take the first finger off. And then I'm going to go back to the E7, so that means I put that index finger back on, move my middle finger back up to get that E7 shape. And then all I need to do now is put that index finger up there, third finger, and then put that pinky on. So there's the B7. So E7, 2 strums, A7, 2 strums, E7, and then B7. And if you've been on my channel for any amount of time, then you'll realise I've talked about this thing where I think it was Sunhouse came to the UK, and he came with his guitar and he played with the house band, which I think it was the beginning of what was Genesis, if I'm not mistaken, from a documentary I saw. And they couldn't understand why he wasn't playing the blues in time. And basically they said, well, we're playing a 12-bar blues, aren't they? And Sunhouse said, it isn't a 12-bar blues, it's however many bar blues I feel it is. And that just blew the whole idea of like having to stick to 8 bars. It's an 8-bar blues in E. That's what this is here. It's got structure. You can stick to it if you want. But if you want the human experience, then you want to be able to be free and just say, man, I'm digging this A7 here. I've found some notes that I really like. Oh, this is juicy. I'm going to stick on this for a bit. And that bar expands, and it might expand to be like 2.5 bars. It doesn't matter. It's perfectly fine. It's about feeling free and liberated. Now, there's lots of different ways to play these chords and how we play them. So we've got all the different grips that we can use. Now we know the structure, the form of the 8-bar blues, that we realise that we don't have to adhere to. Actually, something about the turnaround. So what we can do, the turnaround, instead of playing the E7, there, which is the turnaround, what we can do is we can play. And I'm still catching that last B7 at the end. Remember, there's a B7 at the end. So those sliding D7 shapes are taking up that next to last bar and half of the last bar there. So all that there. But I definitely want to land on that B7, because that B7 is the 5 chord of the key. And if we think about cadences and the way they work, chord 5 to chord 1 is the completing of the sound. So really, by going to that B7, and then when I land on the 1, it sounds like I've gone back to the beginning. Yeah, and that's what the turnaround does. I imagine that the turnaround is like one of those train things when the train gets to the train station and there's no more track and the train wants to go back the other way. If it hasn't got an engine on the other side, there used to be these turntables and they just turn them around and face them the other way and it goes back again. So it's very much kind of like that. And the train is perfect because the rhythm of the train is the rhythm of the blues. Yeah, so turnaround goes, remember, D7, move it up a whole step, becomes an E7. So and move that first finger over there and get my E chord there. And then once I've done that, it sounds finished. Can you hear how that sounds finished? So that's like the end of the tune, if you will. The cadence, that's what it's called. Right? Now what we can do with that turnaround, I should say as well, is I can get rid of some of these fingers. You don't have to use all the fingers. Look, I'll just use one finger out of that. I'll take the D7 shape, move these fingers. Now that's taking me back to the beginning again. Here's the E. So that is the full 8 bars that I played there. So that was a full go around that. That was in a more of a strict time. But you don't have to have a strict time to it. You don't at all. And I like that freedom. So we can play the chord, explore the sound of the chord. And then in between, we can add bits to it. So we want to add some scales. And the scale that you really want to tap into with this, the first one, really is this minor pentatonic here. If you want to look at it from open 3 on the E string, open 2 on the A string, open 2 on the D string, open 2 on the G string, open 3 on the B string, open 3 on the thin E string as well. Play that E minor pentatonic, but what we can do is we can add some bluesy flavour to that by adding the flat 5, and let me explain. The open E string is the root, the 3rd fret is the flat 3rd, the open A string is the 4th, this note here is the flat 5, the blues notes, the blue note here, and there's the 5th just here. And then I go here, flat 7 on the open D string, 2nd fret on the D string is the root note again. Yeah. I practice those in little sections, so you could go. It's pretty cool there, right? So if I want to go up the octave with this to end on this thin E string, I've got that, and my flat 5 is here. I can do some little pull off stuff here. And I like that because it's at the 3rd fret, and those are at the 3rd fret. You see? Now what I like to do is, because these chords have got major thirds, look, this has got a major third, and you can do this with all of these chords as well. If I take an E chord and I play it as an E minor and then hammer the index finger on, you can hear I get that kind of a roll to it, yeah? I can do the same thing with an A7 here. I can actually hold down on it. It's like an A minor 7. Yeah, and I can do it on that B7. There's the minor third there. And then I put that major third on, becomes that B7 chord. So that's a nice little effect. And I like to use that on its own, just like... Now, because I can do that within the chord, I can do it on the scale. So this is the flat third, and I'm implying that I'm bending it up to the major third, which I can slide to, actually. But I just want that little bluesy moo bend. Yeah. And I particularly like that kind of a Reverend Gary Davis sort of thing. The rougher you do it, the better. Play the open thick E string and hammer on to that. The timing should be just a little bit out. And I'm just playing that from that scale, and I'm thinking to myself, yeah, so we've got this little idea here. And because this is the flat third here, I could do it here. Look at that. You could do the same thing, what I was doing there with that on the A as well. So that's there as well. Now, here's another cool thing that we can do off this. When we were doing pentatonics, guys, and I told you about the rectangle and leg. Now, because this is the one chord, what I can do is I can use this as a starting point. Yeah, I've got my pentatonic here. That's great. I know where that is, but what if I want it to sound happy? Because blues is about a mix of happy and sad, isn't it, really? So what I do is, I can use actually the open E string as well. I can use a major pentatonic on it as well. But what I like to do is I like to target this root note here in the 5R3. 5R3. So go from the R there, to go up a whole step. So you can see I've gone up a whole step there. And then what I do is I draw a rectangle. So this is one corner of a rectangle. There's the other corner of a rectangle. Up the next string. So I've got this rectangle here. Now if I want to as well, what I can do, I can fill that in as well. I've talked about that before. So you can hear there that I played the major pentatonic. And go straight into that minor sound there. That lives on that E. Now when I go to the A, I've got the fifth, the root, I've got the third again here, guys. So there's the root. What I can do is I can take that shape. I've got to be careful though. Warning. I'm going to cross over onto the kink in the tuning, so I have to compensate. So my rectangle becomes a rhomboid. Up a step. That's the leg. Slide up. Yeah, so that would be me finishing off that pattern there. And I can actually play my minor pentatonic from there as well. You see that? That's the roots. There's the flat third. There's the 4th, flat 5th, 5th. Yeah. So I can play that off that as well. And this is where the shapes come in really good. Now, here is a cool one. Because this is the B7, if you remember, because I said this is the real 5 chord, chords 1 and chord 4 are meant to be major 7, but because we're doing a blues, we've just changed them all to be 7th chords, essentially. But because this is the real chord 5, we can do some interesting stuff with this, and what I want to do is just focus on that and make it sound more like a dominant chord. So what I do is I play a dominant pentatonic instead. So I'm going to base it off my B chord here. Okay, I'm going to use the root note here. Yeah, then I go slide up another step. So there's the leg. And I get this trapezoid shape here. So we don't have the rectangle. What happens is we reach out and we get the flat 7 here. Because if I take this here, you can see that it's part of the B7 shape here. Yeah? Okay guys, so to recap on that, got us chord shapes where we take fingers off, we put fingers on, and now we can have this underlying framework of just having the minor pentatonic that we can tap into. So you're playing the E chord in its varieties. Yeah, you can play that there. When you play the A7, you can play the minor pentatonic blues underneath that as well. And then when I play the B7, that works as well, but it makes more sense to have scales for each of the chords, and that's what I'm saying. Essentially, when we play the E, play the major pentatonic from the root of the 5R3. So that's where that lives there. Play it on the A. There it is on the A and on the B. And that's where it is on the B7 as well. I could imagine the 5R3 here. There. We're tying with that shape there. So if you're going like this, you're going, you want your B7 using that A7 shape here. I'm matching the tonality of the scale to the tonality of the chord. So if it's a major chord at its heart, I can play a major pentatonic on it. So on the E major, I'm playing an E major pentatonic, but I can jazz that up by adding that flat third, which is the equivalent of the flat 5 for a major blues.